This is Real Talk. My name is Mark Christensen. We're here with Rob Matzkin today. I'm very excited to have Rob on here. Rob, you and I met just a few weeks ago, but I'm intrigued with who you are and with the organization, one of the organizations that you lead. So how you doing today? How's New York today?
I'm doing good. Yeah, New York's good. It's weather could be better, but circumstances could be better. But all things considering, it's a good day over here.
Excellent. So, Rob, the theme of our discussion today is how to boost your return on your learning dollar. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, can you just share with us, tell us a little bit about who you are and why this is a topic that you're qualified to talk about?
Sure. So I'm Rob Matzkin. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've had 7 different companies over the last 15 years, a few successful exits as well. Currently, I run a company called MyQuest. We're a digital education platform. As well, I also run a coaching and consulting business as well, because I have a passion for helping others out. And I'm also a VP in another company that specializes in bringing global startups to the US, and I focus on their biz dev and growth strategies. And we focus on growing their sales by 10 to 20x. But the reason we've met, the reason we're talking today is I'm a co-founder of a company called MyQuest. And at MyQuest, we really focus on how do we really make an impact in digital learning and make sure learners are succeeding at what they need to accomplish, right? So much knowledge today is put out in the digital world. And until a few months ago, there wasn't much, how do I put this right? Attention focused on, well, how successful it is. Mm-hmm. And we've always been really asking the question, how do we make learning successful? I guess to answer your second question is, why am I qualified for this? I've been running MyQuest for the last 5 years. Our passion is make an impact in learning and make an impact in people's lives. And really, we've always focused on how do we actually really make sure learners can succeed at what they need to accomplish.
Yeah, so let's go back, because I sense in talking to you, I've talked to you a couple times, and just in the full disclosure here, I was in search for a tool that we could use with our clients that wasn't really, I wasn't looking for an LMS. I know how to find an LMS. Mm-hmm. And I actually wasn't even looking for something that could deliver online digital learning. I was looking for a tool that would help amp up, you call it action-based learning. I didn't call it that, but that's really what I was looking for, right? So it seems like even before we talk about digital learning, you guys seem to be pretty smart at talking about action-based learning, which to me is where learning really happens, when you actually do something with it and it affects the type of change in the workplace that drops to the bottom line, right? So talk to me about that.
Sure. It's a broad subject. When we built the platform, we really want to ask a simple question. It wasn't how do we make learning simple, or how do we get learning online? It's how do we make learning effective, right? So I work with behavioral scientists like Dan Ariely is one of my co-founders, really good friends. He's a New York Times bestseller, and Duke University professor, but as well as a few neuroscientists. But if we look back at how we actually learn, right? And you look at how you actually teach in a real world environment, or how you go back 400 years. Well, how did we learn? We didn't learn from sitting in a classroom environment. We learned by doing. We learned through an apprenticeship model, right? And it's always learning by doing. And even when we do an in-person training, we don't just sit there and lecture. If we do, they're really, not really effective. They're boring, right? Yeah. We always do role plays. We always create interactive questions. We have tools, tactics, techniques that we bring to the table that draw people in to really make sure that they're participating, that they're doing things. And in the digital world, I think we have a huge opportunity to say, you know what, let's make learning part of our daily habits, right? Let's make learning part of daily work. So we actually could go out and incorporate the learnings of the day into our workflow, right? Versus saying, hey, I'd learn this over here, because I go to I remember going to Tony Robbins' Business Mastery, and I loved it. It was so much fun. It was, it's like going to a rock concert and learning something. Great.
Yeah.
And I was jazzed up for like 3-4 days, and I get back and I'm trying to incorporate it into my world. And I was motivated to do so. I never did. I didn't do anything with it. Right. And I paid a lot of money for it. But I got a fire hose of information. I grew a bit, but did I move the needle in my business? No. Why not? Because I didn't have any reinforcement there. So if you go back and look at other programs, I don't know if you're familiar with Landmark Education at all. Tony Robbins sends his employees there. Similar concept. What they do is they give you a fire hose of a weekend, and then they have you come back for free 10 days for 10 classes, 10 weeks in a row, reinforcing what you just learned. So that reinforcement, putting into action into real life, I think is a huge component, and you see it across the education spectrum. So that's really where we get inspired from. That's a long-winded way of explaining it. But just to also reiterate one thing, I'm not the hugest proponent of saying you should only do a digital program. I don't think that's where you see the most success. I think having a blended learning, and I've always thought this, is the most impactful. So in person with reinforcement. Now today, Zoom or some sort of digital face-to-face training with the reinforcement, I think is the most effective.
So thank you for that. I'm gonna give you a couple metaphors that we like to use, and then have you talk to those. Okay.
Sure.
I get teased all the time because one of my favorite metaphors, I call it the dirty guppy syndrome. All right. You take the guppy out of the dirty pond, clean them up, right? Jazz them up, spruce them up, send them to the workshop. And then they're all excited. They got new stuff, and you put them right back into the dirty pond, right? And so you're talking about doing something other than that. That's kind of like, I agree with you. Tony Robbins is great. I think there's value in that. It's what you do with it afterwards, right? That's key. And so that's the one metaphor. The other one is the football metaphor. I think you told me that you played football, right? You're an athlete from college and so forth.
Yeah.
It doesn't work to simply even to take action in your backyard, right? If you're a linebacker, you can practice tackling a dummy in your backyard, but that doesn't give you all of it either, right? You have to do more than that. It has to be in the context of the actual game, right? And so in the workplace too, somehow we need to create experiences where people can actually, not just the guppy gets to actually change the pond or work on the pond or improve the skill in the context of the pond. So I don't know, can you talk about that? I mean,
yeah, sure. So the way we look at things, you mentioned we have an action-based learning model. It's called action, feedback, and trigger, right? So we want people going out and taking actions. We want to get their feedback. We want to incentivize to keep going forward and building habits, right? But we want a cohort of people. We don't want you doing this alone. We want you doing it with your peers. We want you to do it with your manager, right? So we want you doing something together, and we want you sharing it together as a group. That group might be 10 of you. That might be the whole company. That might be managed by the actual manager. It might be managed by learning. But we want everybody doing it as a cohort, so you guys learn, so everybody learns together. We want to keep reinforcing that together as a team, right? We want to do it as a unit. We don't want to just send one person here, one person there. I think one of the things that we've always spoke about, I think with companies such as yourself or training companies, is multiple different tiers of education, right? For so long, I have so many clients that they just teach to the upper echelon of management, and they have tremendous information that they deliver to them, and it's fantastic, and it's top-down leadership, and it's top-notch. But you teach it to 20 people, you sell it each to $5,000 a pop. It's a good business. It's great to do. But having just the leadership move the needle is so challenging. But coming from ground up and delivering the same information, maybe in a different medium, instead of selling the time for money, sell the value for money through digital systems, so you can meet in the middle. So everybody's getting the same training, so you could really move the needle, I think, is one thing that I really recommend doing. So you can have still your premium offerings and your offerings to the masses. And I think that's one of the things that digital really allows us to do, or digital scale allows us to do as well.
Because you can get the water to the end of the row, so to speak. Another metaphor
Yep.
for you, I guess. But
I love the metaphors. Keep them coming.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk for a minute then again about this return on learning dollar, return on investment. We know about that. We've Learning Point's been in business for 31 years, and we're always having to prove the value in one way or another of what we provide, and help internal learning professionals do the same thing. But it's amazing how many definitions you can get for return on learning value, right? And so, for example, the common one is that this solution, this option is more cost efficient than this one, without any consideration whether option A can produce any result versus option B, right? So option A may cost half as much as option B, but it doesn't actually move the needle, as you mentioned, at all. Option B may cost twice as much, but it moves the needle in terms of bottom line business results. So what formula would you use to calculate return on learning dollar, return on investment?
Well, I think it's simple multiplication, right? 100 times 1 equals 100. 100 times 2 equals 200. 100 times 0 still equals 0.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you're not moving the needle at all, then what's the point of doing it? But I think, I don't know if ROI or ROL it's a metric that I like to use, but as you said, it can be construed different ways. But I think going back actually a more simpler step and saying, what outcome are you looking to achieve? Why are you doing this learning? Why are you even spending $1 on this? Well, you're looking to achieve an outcome. What is that, and how do you achieve it? Now, are you looking to pay lip service and just check a box? Okay, then just throw it on your LMS. Don't spend any more money, and just buy something from LinkedIn Learning and be done with it, and it's great. And there's nothing wrong with what I just said to do.
Right.
But if you have a sales objective, and your sales objective is, how do I grow my sales team and increase sales by 15%? Well, I need to do some training. Okay, great. Well, how are you going to achieve that 15%? Well, I'm going to have them take all these online courses, and it's going to be great. Well, what's the return on learning if you don't get to the 15%? You've lost money. It's negative. Right. So I think that's the way I would look at things.
Anchored to an actual performance goal or a business metric, that type of thing.
Yeah, so, and then you incorporate that into your equation, and you get the return, right?
Rob, let's talk for a minute about, you have launched and sold some successful businesses.
I have. That
have nothing to do with learning and training. I think one was it a beverage distribution business or something like that?
Well, I know you're in Utah, but yeah, we did something called alcohol delivery. So we actually invented alcohol delivery in the U.S. So you go on your phone, you order alcohol in 30 minutes, and we'll deliver to you. So it was like, you know, it was like Seamless Web or Grubhub for the alcohol industry. We did it 10 years ago when last mile delivery was very interesting and difficult, and it was a fun thing to do in my 20s. But now I don't even drink, so.
Yeah, and that's fine. I guess what I'm getting at is you have a lot of experience in business, not just in the training business, right?
Yeah.
So this idea of metrics and bottom line is language that you're familiar with, right?
Absolutely.
Now MyQuest is the company that you're leading, one of the companies that you're involved with now leading, co-founded it, is a training solutions business, right? So you talk with training professionals and decision makers and maybe HR and, you know, senior learning officers, that type of thing. Do they understand this language of business in your experience? Maybe that's a loaded question. That's a tough one to answer, huh?
So it doesn't matter if they do. They're my client. Is one point, but I think people are related to what everybody cares about, what they need and what objectives they need to do. And I think I don't necessarily talk to them in business metrics. If I talk to the head of a sales department, I'll talk how I just did. But if I'm talking to HR and learning and development, I try and frame it to why are you delivering specific trainings? Typically L&D and HR, I think I'm speaking very generally right now, are very overwhelmed with a lot of demands and a lot of training, and to deliver a lot of training needs. And too often I think we get stuck into how are we going to execute this, let alone execute it effectively, let alone looking at the metrics of it, is my really honest answer. But no, I think each department has the metrics that they care about. And a lot of departments, HR is removed in some ways from business matrix, rightfully so, because they want to insulate and treat their focus is the employee base, not the bottom line.
Bottom line, yeah. So they try to find that medium, but you're right that they have a certain set of a value that they're trying to meet that's different than what the COO or someone else is trying to achieve. Yeah.
But you also know this. It's so different from culture to culture, especially in the Fortune 5000, where some cultures are very teed up to and very in line with performance and looking at those details, and others aren't.
Yeah, that's true. It's organization by organization, culture by culture, function within an organization.
Yeah, but I do feel the highest performing teams and cultures are asking the metrics, the metric questions, and are asking, how do we see a return on this? How do we achieve our goals? Or what are the goals of this? Right? I think so many times people are putting out trainings and going, we need to put this training out, and it's going to be really important. But what do you want to achieve? And the same company will ask that question in every other department, but they won't necessarily ask it in learning. Yeah. And I think the ones that are really performing, and you see that.
They're treating learning as a strategic initiative as opposed to an ancillary thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we weren't necessarily going to talk about this, but I feel compelled. I want to talk about MyQuest, the platform.
Okay.
Because I'm intrigued, and I don't own it. I haven't helped a client install it yet. But that's how you and I met, is because I was in search for something, right? As I mentioned earlier. How is MyQuest different than an LMS? And by LMS, I mean a learning management system, that we're probably all familiar with, where you can download content. It keeps track of what the learner has taken and consumed. You can give a test and that type of thing. But my impression is that MyQuest is different than that. What makes it different?
Yeah, so there's a few things. I get asked that a lot. The first and foremost thing to point out is there are probably 700 LMSs right now. And every one of us will say that we're different. And in fact, that's why we kind of came up with a different product that kind of works inside the existing ecosystem. But I'll talk about our core LMS right now. And all our products, it comes down to the question that we started the business from, and the question of where and why me and my partner started this business. And it really goes from a typical LMS goes, how do we make delivering content easy? Or how do we get content delivered online? And that question was great for 2000, 2002, 2005. We started this in building this iteration of the product in 2017 and 2016. It's easy to put content online. We didn't need to answer that question. We asked the question, how do we effectively deliver that training? How do we make sure we deliver results? And what it comes down to is we deliver results through engaging with learners. And when we build a product, you talk about, you hear people talking about consumer products and making them sticky and making sure, you look at Facebook, their only goal is to make sure you're spending 45 minutes a day on Facebook to make it addicting, right? So we want to look at those same principles and best practices of building a product, and how do we get learners to be there and stay there and make it learning addicting? Why not, right? And when we go to build that product, all of a sudden, the key for us is creating engagement. Learning in a traditional LMS, there's no engagement. 3.8% of learners will do something more than click next, like, post, comment, interact with the training whatsoever. They're like, click next, get me to the next post. With us, 76% of our learners will engage with us, like, post, comment, interact with the learning content. I will be as bold to say, if you're not interacting with the content and doing anything with it, how are you going to remember it? And in fact, 87% of learners will not remember anything that they learned 6 weeks later. That's crazy. So our goal is, how do we get 87% of learners to remember, well, more than something, hopefully everything, 6 months or a year later? And we do that through engagement. And we see direct correlations. If somebody engages with us 16 or more times, like, post, comments, interacts 16 times, and there's thousands of opportunities to do that, they will have not only a 95% completion rate, and oh, by the way, normal completion rate is 2%, 95% completion rate, and a much, much higher likelihood of retaining that information and being able to impact it into their workplace, right? So that's what we look to do. You know, I could go and talk about all the features and the bells and whistles, but the objective is, how do we actually engage with our learners? Because it's the same thing. You know, you look at somebody who's delivering a seminar and they're just starting their career, they're just starting their business, and they're kind of boring. Or you look at a keynote speaker, right? And they're not engaging the audience at all. They're not going to be invited back, or they're not going to be effective. But what makes Tony Robbins Tony Robbins? Well, he engages his audience. Everybody's captivated. He literally makes you jump up and dance, right? He's making sure you're entertained and engaged and fed and all these other things. But he's thinking through the experience of being in his room. Where somebody else who's just starting is, I sold 50 seats. I put them in a room. I just gotta get the knowledge out. I gotta make sure they hear everything I have to say. Doesn't matter. They need to feel it. So that's what we try and do digitally.
Okay. So I have this objective. I have this problem that I need to solve. It's real. It's actually the one that led me to you. Okay.
Okay.
But we haven't talked about this yet. So this is totally off the cuff.
I'm sweating.
Yeah, no, I think you'll be able to answer this. And I know of a few things that your platform has in it that intrigue me. Okay. But one thing that our clients have asked for repeatedly, and so we start to build a solution for it, is a mechanism that will, a learning experience that will onboard a new leader. We've been calling it New Leader Launch. And based on our experience and based on the research that we've done, we've identified 10 launches, 10 paths in 10 different areas that if a learner will do a leader will do these things, 10 journeys, if you will, they will establish themselves in a much better, stronger position as a new leader. You know, the majority of leaders that are appointed to leaders, they're a good worker, they become a leader, and they don't have any training at all on that, right? They're promoted because they did their worker bee job really well.
Yeah, classic like sales manager or sales leader example, right? They're just great at being sales, but they don't know how to teach others, stuff like that. And
then they become frustrated. Their boss becomes frustrated with them. Their team members become frustrated with, you know, it's not always, but oftentimes, all too often, more than should be, right? So there's these 10 paths that maybe take up to 10 weeks or 18 weeks for them to complete each of these paths. It's not something you can just sit down and go to a class on, right? And so a client may say, well, we have a half-day onboard class. That's how we onboard our employees. Well, do you have anything for leaders? Well, no. And if we do, it'd probably be another half-day workshop, you know? Here are the policies, blah, blah, blah. So we want them to do, each one of these paths has 5 distinct actions they need to take. And they need to go and do it in real life, right? So go have an initial discussion with your boss to calibrate on what your job expectations are, for example, right? Talk to your stakeholders, get organized, organize your workspace. So 10 paths, 5 key actions in each path, that's 50 different key actions that if they will complete those actions, they're going to be in a much better position to succeed as a new leader, right? And that's great because we can line out the actions, but guess what? Because I'm not their boss, I can tell them what to do. And I'm pretty sure that if they did that, they would be successful, but they're not accountable to me, right?
Right.
So they need to be accountable to someone who they are actually accountable to when it comes to their learning.
Right.
And
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, so whatever platform or tool we use needs to give them that structure and feed them in a reasonable way the tools, the information, and the accountability mechanism so that they can succeed at completing these paths. Is that anything that MyQuest could help with?
Absolutely. Actually, it's perfect of how we lay it out, and it's exactly how we lay it out, right? So what we do is we have an architecture, right? The way we, without going into the system, but we label things missions, and we label things levels. A level is a chapter, a mission is an action. So you describe 10 levels, 10 chapters, 5 missions in each, right? The reason you use that is from games. It's a game mechanic. I need to go on a quest. I need to go on a journey.
Okay.
Right. So, and the language we use is specific for reasons. But okay, action 1. I need to go accomplish this. I need to go, and I'm a new leader. I need to go and get related to my team. I need to ask them about their family. I asked them about their family. How's your family doing? And they unloaded on me that, their daughter's sick, their son's this, their mother's this. And I acknowledged them, but I was overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do. What do I do? It didn't go well, and how do I and all this stuff. It's a real world scenario, right?
Yeah.
But what do you do with that? Well, you took the action, and because we're going to do in the quest is we're going to go tell you to do that. Get related to your team. You're going to go do that. Then this is actually, it's the simplest thing we do, and it produces the best results. We're going to go, how did it go? What did you learn from doing that? Or some sort of thought-provoking question that gets them to share. Probably not the best question to ask with what I just did, but you get my point. And we're going to ask them to share it. Now, share that in a community of leaders doing the same thing with them, maybe moderated by a manager or leader in the organization. We could pair them up with an accountability buddy, right? So it's doing the training with them. Or we could pair them with you or somebody from your team to be their coach. And now what we've done is we've set a framework that they know they're being held accountable. They know somebody's looking at them. They know somebody's looking at the results. But more importantly, from a learning perspective, they're going out and they're doing something and they're getting confronted. And it's not easy. And the best ones are going to be easy enough to do, or hard enough that's going to confront them. And when they're confronted, they're going to get help. And somebody else is going to see those trials, tribulations, successes, and failures, and somebody else could teach them what that is. So even if it's the manager's growing, getting related to the organization by answering those questions as well, right? So that's how I would kind of structure it, and on and go across all 50 actions, right? So all of a sudden now, what I've been saying, you see the difference between, hey, getting related to your staff is really important. These are some questions you could ask, is what you would do in an LMS. With us is getting related to your staff is really important. Now go do it. Oh my God, I got confronted. Now experience it and now talk about it and have that question. So everybody becomes that learner that's raising their hand in the back of the room going, I could never do that, or this is what's going to happen if I do that. And they have all those conversations all the time. And imagine the difference between, oh, I learned something versus I experienced this. You're never going to forget that experience. That's the difference.
Yeah. So it lines up the experience, gives you the tools. You mentioned it can connect you with colleagues, people going through it with you, right?
Yep.
It could match you up with someone like me or someone like you, which is an outside coach. Here's the big question, and I actually don't know the answer to this based on how much I've learned about MyQuest so far, but can it pair you up with your boss? Because to me, that's a big part of it, right? Is that your boss actually becomes your main coach.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
They can.
We,
Okay.
the system could diagnose, distinguish, or we set up who's going to be your coach. Okay. Your coach is your manager. Your coach is whoever, right? Or it's a one-on-one coach between coach. We set that up. So that's easy. The other thing to also add, like what I just mentioned, getting related to your staff, should you do that once or should you do that every day to somebody else? So we actually have a reoccurring habit. So you'll just, I wouldn't say don't do 50 habits because nobody can do 50 habits a day,
Right.
but choose a few really important starts.
Yeah.
Maybe 10, maybe, because you want them to do it every day, but maybe it happens once a week. But if you could do, I like Kaizen, right? Small things that you could do every day versus huge tasks. If you give somebody an hour of habits, forget it.
Yeah.
But, ask somebody how they're doing every day, right? So every day we're going to repeat this habit and we're going to remind them, did you ask one team member about how they're doing today? And did you get related to them? Yes, I did. We're going to build that in as a daily part of your workflow.
So there's a tool in there that can help you create that habit. It reminds you to go do that daily thing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So we have our 50 missions, right? We have what we're doing. And then one of those at the time, like the starred thing, the star of that, we have 10 different levels, right? That star thing
needs to be a habit.
We're going to say, we're going to go through it like we just did, like we discussed, and then we're going to repeat that every day.
So it feeds them something or gives them some sort of a.
It's like it's just a notification. Hey, we explain what it is, your daily habit. Did you check in with somebody on your team today? Yes, I did. And you could go on the system and acknowledge that you did it before you did it. If you didn't do it by 8 p.m. today, we'll send you a notification being like, "What's going on? Why didn't you do it? Why aren't you doing the work?" So the system, going back to the conversation we were having earlier, when we created the system, we go, if I'm your personal coach and I was paid, $10,000 a week to be your coach and to coach you through this and make sure you did it, what would I do to be on top of you? Well, I'd be talking to you multiple times a day. I'd be sending you reminders. I'd be sending you follow-ups, all these different things. So we try and incorporate that mentality. And how do we scale that? So it's not, so we give somebody a one-on-one experience to 1 on 10,000. That's what we want to do.
Excellent. Good. So, and as you're doing that, it will also, the tool, the platform, MyQuest, can teach you stuff too. It can deliver video or documents, other things that an LMS can do, right?
Oh, sure.
It does that, but then it also has this built-in
we have like
action-based learning component, I guess.
So we're doing everything an LMS is doing, but we have a different modality of how we deliver that learning content. And then the other thing to add, so we have this modality, this action-based learning, this engagement-based learning that we've been speaking about, and we have our own standalone platform that we've been speaking about. But then when we work inside of large organizations, and I don't know who's online or who's going to be watching this, so if you're inside a large organization, you're going, great, Rob, that sounds fantastic. That's really nice. I'm not buying another LMS. I'm not switching to you. I go, okay, great, no problem. I went to my partner. What was it? This was about 8 months ago. We hadn't seen each other in 4 months because I used to live in Tel Aviv in Israel. I moved back to New York about 8 months ago, and we met up for the first time in 4 months. So we're going, knowing what we know about the learning ecosystem now, if we started from scratch today, what would we do? And we talk about it. I'm going, well, why don't we do that? And so one of the things, so we did, and we go, the learning system is entrenched. There's 20 million courses out there taught a specific way. There's 700 LMSs in there. And if you're in a large organization, you're talking about one of your clients, they have 10 LMSs, right?
5 of them, they developed themselves. They said
5 of them, they developed themselves. And everybody, because it's never perfect. And everybody's like, we're better. So I go, content's out there, systems are out there. They're not moving to me. Hey, Rob, you're really smart. You're really great, but that's nice. See you later. So, and then there's this other thing that was gaining traction and now has exploded called Slack and now Microsoft Teams, right?
Yeah.
Which is the instant message tools that are embedded inside the organization. So we go, wait a second. This is a communication and engagement tool. This is the LMS. So now we try and bring everything together. And we just kind of sit in the middle doing what we discussed before, these outcomes, again, what outcome is MyQuest really achieving? When I'm trying to sell you something, Mark, what am I really selling you? I'm not really selling you an LMS. I'm selling you an objective. I'm selling you a tool that allows you to achieve your objectives.
Yeah.
Right? That's what I'm selling you. So how do I create that? Using an existing corporation's existing tools. So we could bring 10 LMSs, but for the sake of this conversation, we bring the LMS, we connect it into Microsoft Teams. So the learning actually happens in Microsoft Teams. Now, Microsoft Teams, again, people are using it 90 to 180 minutes a day. We're using it 90 minutes a day before all this started. I'd imagine that stat has doubled.
Yeah.
Their user base went from 20 million to 54 million users today in like matter of months. But again, so we're bringing the learning into Teams. So now all of a sudden, this learning is already transpiring in Teams. And now we're doing everything and all the automation that we spoke about, creating those conversations, creating those engagements inside of Teams. So doing the exact same thing, the exact same scenario that we just went over 5 minutes ago, I can now do that in any organization, utilizing their existing software infrastructure and their existing course content.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, MyQuest can be integrated with Teams. If they're using Teams, they may have an LMS, they have Teams, and now MyQuest is like a booster technology that can integrate with that as well, that helps you get the execution done, right?
Exactly.
The implementation.
Well, again, exactly. And again, it's a little confusing not showing it, but we're all about, our philosophy is learning needs to be engagement. Just delivering knowledge doesn't work. So how do we create engagement? So what MyQuest really is an engagement tool. So how do we bring that engagement in learning? Well, this is the learning infrastructure. Teams is an engagement tool. It's a communication tool. So we connect A and B, and MyQuest is C, and we create this learning engagement ecosystem utilizing everything that everybody has existing.
Yeah, I'm going to need to learn more about MyQuest, take it to the next level. And I know that wasn't, I don't want it to sound like somehow we've set up this commercial, because that wasn't the intention.
No, in fact, we specifically said, I'm like, Rob, you could talk about MyQuest a little bit. I go, Mark, I don't want to talk about MyQuest. I want to provide value to your community.
And I think that will provide value. I do want to, we've got about 10 minutes left. I know that you've been holding a lot of discussions on other topics, right? I know that you've been talking with folks. I picked this up by talking with you and a couple people from your firm about the thing that's on all of our minds. And I know that we're, in one way, we're getting tired of talking about COVID and all this, but it's also still very relevant. And what's becoming relevant is the reopening, right? Going back to whatever it is. We're not going to go back to the old way, but whatever it is when we start to go to work again. And I know you've got some thoughts on that. So, and you are right in the center of virtual teamwork, virtual communication, using technology, digital type tools to facilitate and actually energize workplace collaboration, teamwork, that type of thing. So can you talk, what, if you were to give us the 3 to 5 golden nuggets, things to think about as we re-enter or go to the next phase of this global experience that we're going through, what comes to mind based on what you've heard, based on what what comes to mind?
So, the journal, the Wall Street Journal had an interesting article today about opening back office spaces, and is it EY or one of the big four has this new software that's going to track employees and make sure nobody's getting close and all this stuff. And it's for real estate companies so they could get people back into the office space, which I think is great. And my dad's like, we got to get back. I'm like, okay. And I do think the economy needs to open, and I do think the situation that we're in is not sustainable. But we need to be responsible. And when it comes to white collar work, especially, and it depends, this is so industry dependent. When it comes to white collar work, we've learned how it's better to work from seeing people and be next to people. And it's better to not be home and have the distractions. My team actually is performing better at home. But we're all millennials, and we have less distractions at home. But I don't see white collar workforce needing to be, and I think people who need to be in specific work roles need to come back. But the ones who don't, I think it's our responsibility also to minimize social contact, because we all are part of the same team. So I think people will come together. And, if you're in an office and it was packed before, maybe you could only have on and off days, and maybe you only come in once or twice a week. And I think that's going to stay for the foreseeable 6 months, hopefully, maybe year forecast. So I think being in a workspace, being in all in one room is not going to necessarily happen. You might all go to the office, but you're not going to all get in a crowded conference room again. We're not going to be doing and now going to you and in-person training. I don't think you're doing an in-person training in the next 12 months. I think even if offices come back, they're going to say, you're coming from across the country, and I don't know what's going on in your state at any given time to come into our office. I don't think so. My sister sells to the biggest retailers of them all, and you have to come to us to sell. I don't think they're asking that anymore. Right. I don't think they want them there.
Yeah.
Right. So I think business travel is going to be affected, things like that. But so those are the trends I'm seeing. So what does that mean? Right. I think what we're putting in place now and how we're going to do training needs to plan on being remote. And I think it's going to be here to stay because people will get used to it. Right. And especially if we nail how to do it effectively. Because at the end of the day, my sister's thrilled. She's not traveling. She doesn't want to be on a plane 20 times a month.
Yeah.
I don't think you really want to be on a plane 20 times a month.
I'm not sure I'm going back to that, because now I know that there's different ways to, there's be a blend. I know you use the word blended. We're going to go to something different than right now today, but it won't be what was 6 months ago. Yeah.
I think the key is, how do we still, across the board, from when all this started, I was like, right now I need to provide more value to everybody in my ecosystem, that as much value to everybody in my ecosystem as I possibly can. And business is going to be way harder to produce the same results that I once was getting, but I could still get those results, right? And I think for everybody, it's how do we achieve the outcomes that we need to achieve? Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be the easiest way to achieve those outcomes, but we still need to get there, right? And I think we need a plan for the worst, which is working from home, or there's worse than that, but we need a plan from working from home and not necessarily going into the office. And what is that life like at a personal level and a professional level? And how do we, and I think the people that have the hardest time with that, we actually decided to give up our office, right? We had our office this month. We decided to give it up. If we need an office again, we'll get it in. And the team's performing great with it. Mm-hmm. But one of our concern is the newest team members has been with us for 2 years. But when we're growing right now, when we onboard new people, how do we handle that? Right. And that's where the challenge is. So everybody will have their own different challenges. Those are some of my thoughts. I don't know if that was what you're looking for.
I'm attached to an organization based in Southern California. I'm on their employee email list, but I'm not an employee of theirs. But mm-hmm. I've been following them on this whole experience since it started, and they have employees around the world. They landed a multi-million-dollar contract with a government agency during this shutdown. And they claim that part of what helped them succeed in landing that contract, bidding against other, competitors, mm-hmm. was that the shutdown nudged them into collaborating differently. Less travel, let's get on, let's figure out this team thing. I don't know if they use Microsoft Teams like we talked about, or something. Yeah. They started to interact and work together on this thing in ways that they wouldn't have done had this not happened, right? And mm-hmm. they give this shutdown the credit for influencing that change. And they say, we're going to do it this way from now on. Even if we can't be in the same room and do things the old way, we need to now use this new innovation that we've created and technology to help us achieve our work, which I thought was pretty cool.
I think that's really cool. I think the right team members will thrive in this environment because they won't be distracted. Now, with that in mind, I think it's not necessarily, we got to worry about our mental health at some point if we're not having social interactions, because, so much of our time at work is spent around the water cooler, having side conversations, catching up. It's not as efficient if you actually think about it. When we're at home, as long as we don't have personal distractions there and we're diligent, I'm much more productive, right? At home, because I don't have those distractions. Now I need to worry about my mental health now because I'm not having those conversations, right? Yeah. You work from home. You happen to have your lovely wife with you, so you have somebody to talk to. I'm here all by myself. And other partners in my firm, they have their kids running around them, like crawling on them all day. So it's also difficult. Everybody has their own challenges, right?
Different challenges, yeah. So, hey, we have just a couple minutes, and we did get a couple comments and questions from some listeners. One, and this is going back to MyQuest again. So he told you they would be interested in this. Says, I love the level/mission concept. The construct gives me the feeling of progress versus box checking, right?
Exactly.
And that's an interesting thing. And maybe we need to have another one that, you could, if your mindset is check the box, you could check the box. You could do it, check the box. I guess you could not do the action and still check the box. But I sense that with the reporting that you talked about, the interaction that's in there, you kind of have to talk about your experience, right?
We know everything that's going on, right?
Okay.
We're big brother with actions and interactions. We're not reading your comments, but we know if you commented, right?
Well, and I imagine that the person's boss, if they were involved in this, if they were connected to the learner, my boss can also know what's going on, right?
Well, we have reports specifically showing how much somebody's engaging.
Okay.
And we're able to correlate, again, we spoke about earlier, we're able to correlate engagement to success. And we always, if somebody's really outcome driven, we'll say, great, let's tie this. Let's do a POC, 200, 300 people. Let's run it. And you'll see the engagement performers will see a tick. We could correlate it to a performance metric. The people that engage the most, you'll see the uptick in their performance. They'll do a correlation study. So when you roll it out to 3,000, 4,000 people, you'll know right away how much, and you'll be able to correlate who's going to perform. So you could actually go in and triage while they're in their course who's not engaging and say, hey, we really need you to engage because we'll see your results.
I'm just curious, it just occurred to me, do you have any kind of gamification or point system?
We do have point
system. Got that too?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
And then in the team side of things, we can actually get really crazy with it. And do a lot of fancy things because we could track everything and we produce leaderboards and all this stuff, and we create competitions around everything, and we could tie specific points to specific actions or lack of actions, and so there's a lot of cool things we can do with that. Yeah.
All right. Well, Rob, we're about done here. This has been fun. I've gotten to where I'm curious. I'm kind of snoopy when it comes to what's behind people and their. You have a surfboard back there. Are you a surfer?
I am. It's a newer sport. I've only done it about 4 years, but I love it. It's my favorite thing. And
there's places to surf near New York, I take it.
There is. Last year I was in Portugal, Sri Lanka, and El Salvador.
Oh, so not New York. Okay.
I surfed a little bit here, but it's cold here. I like being in my swim trunks.
All righty. Sounds good. Hey, Rob, thank you very much. We're going to have to do this again. I need to talk with you more. Yeah, go ahead.
Would love to. Before we cut it short, I know a few people chimed in, but does anybody have any questions for me regarding what we spoke about? Was anything in particular interesting, or does anybody have a different subject matter they want to jump into? Or
any additional questions for Rob?
Going once.
It takes time to type, a little bit.
All right, fair enough.
I tell you what, I might get some additional questions. I'll feed them your way. Let's plan to do this again, okay, Rob?
Would love to.
Hey, thank you for your time.
Hey, my pleasure.
Take care. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Take care.